Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear and see me clearly. We actually just got interned at the hub yesterday. So, we're trying to do our best so you guys can get the most from this clinic. Okay, so my name is Shuaib. I work here at the Bike Hub at 15 Tobermory. For those of you who don't know where that is, it's it's in the Jane and Finch Community, just east. We would love to have you in the shop as soon as we can. For now, we're actually doing mostly drop-offs. So if you want to drop your bike off, we can tune your bikes up for free. I really enjoy that part of the job. That's kind of like my forte. I hope you get a lot from this clinic. And if you have any questions, I'll answer them throughout the presentation as well as in the end. So I would like to start by acknowledging the land that we're on. So we acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. The other thing I'd like to mention is just some house rules. So keep your mic muted if you can. That'd be greatly appreciated. Sometimes it creates feedback. Please be respectful of other participants as well. I'll leave the chat box on the right. So if you have any questions, I'll check it regularly just to answer those questions. And then once in a while, we'll open up the mics as well so that you can ask me live questions if typing is a long question is a bit cumbersome. Please do know if there's some technical difficulties, I apologize. It's, like I said, only our second day with the internet up here. But we got fiber optics, which I hear is pretty good. I would like to pass on the baton to Jed. Jed has been a great mentor and guidance for us here at the Hub. We meet regularly, and just having him is just awesome. So Jed, take it away.
Great. Happy Earth Day, everyone. Thank you very much for the warm introduction, Shuaib. And your internet's perfectly fine. The 5 is working really well. I can see and hear you very clearly, which is great. So just again, my name is Jed. I'm with the City of Toronto Solid Waste Management Services Division. Basically, this program here is supported by the Community Reduce Reuse program. It's supported, by the Solid Waste Management Services Department. And it's basically the Community Reduce Reuse program, also known as CRRPs. As you can see there, the 5 CRRPs. Is bicycle repair, sewing repair, urban harvest, community composting, and share reuse spaces. Basically, the main objectives of CRRPs is to reduce waste and build sustainable communities by 3 pillars, basically providing opportunities to reuse, share, and repair items, as well as offering skills trainings. And third is creating spaces for community members to gather. And basically, you're probably wondering, if this is your first time joining us, is what is the Bicycle Repair Hub? Well, basically, the Bicycle Repair Hub promotes cycling culture and waste diversion by repairing bicycles that would have otherwise become scrap metal. We have a number of different program activities that include instruction about bicycle assembly, repair, maintenance, and safety. That's a big one now, is safety. Just to put it in context, at the end of 2020, for the year of 2020, we actually repaired over 3,500 bikes. And at the same time, for last year, we actually hosted 446 bicycle repair workshops, which was really high in terms of what we were able to achieve because of what's going on with the pandemic. But so that's why I applaud everybody. That being said, is we actually have 3 bicycle repair hubs throughout the city of Toronto. And those are we have one in Scarborough, and our strategic partners Access Alliance, and that's at Lawrence and Orden. In the Woburn community. We also have one in the North York community, which is at Flemington, in the Flemington and Thorncliffe community. And that is, we're aligned with our strategic partners, Evergreen, the neighborhood organization, as well as Flemington Health Center. And today you'll be hearing from one of our other strategic partners, CultureLink, and Shuaib there is at 15 Tobermory and represents the Black Creek community, which is a big one. It was actually the first one that we actually invested and started. So I didn't know if you knew that, Shuaib, but CRP actually, the inception was at 15 Tobermory. So that was a big
Oh,
one.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's one fact about CRP, and it's been ongoing for 3 years. And hopefully, with all the outcomes that we were able to achieve, we can hopefully get more funding for our programs here and continue the great work of waste diversion. Either way, I'm going to pass it back to Shuaib. Have a great workshop and happy Earth Day, everyone.
Thank you, Jad. Happy Earth Day, everyone. I should have mentioned that at the top of the hour. Great. So let's jump right into it. So I'm going to start with just talking a little bit about what brought me into cycling. Cycling isn't just a way for me to make a living. I worked in a bike shop for many years, but it actually didn't start that way. I think I was 17 when I was like, oh man, I'm going to build my own bike and I'm going to bike all the way to high school. And so, you know, when you haven't been exposed to cycling all that much, that can seem like a big deal. And school was like 3 kilometers away. So I used to take a bus. And after that, I was like, oh, okay, that's not hard. I mean, I can do that. And then I started like, oh, maybe I'll bike to like from Etobicoke to like Mississauga or something, or like downtown Toronto. And then eventually that was like, huh, that's not that impressive. And then I went, when I started university, I used to commute from my home near the airport all the way to university every day. And eventually it just became like second nature. Yes, of course, it is hard on days when it's really cold. I bike throughout the winter as well. You know, and that became quite normal, maybe not the easiest, but, you know, quite manageable, especially if you have the right gear. And then I got really into bike touring. And now, you know, I've biked to Halifax from Toronto twice. I've biked to Boston, to Washington, to I've gone west as well. I haven't done the trip across the country, which is the one you have to do if you really want to call yourself a bike tourist or really like a serious one. But no, you can be a bike tourist actually, no matter how far you go. So started like a lifelong passion in cycling. And as I get older and more sensitive to social, political issues, I realize how much of a role cycling can play in making people's lives better. You know, like I bike because it's also cheaper, it's good for my mental health, it's better for the environment, it's good for the roads because you don't have heavy vehicles on the road as much, it reduces congestion, it actually helps drivers as well, the more people bike, because for every car, you can fit 8 bikes in that same space. So there are tons of benefits, and to be honest with you, those things are just as important to me, and I know for a lot of my friends who bike as well, and not just, you know, the athletic part of it. So having said that, and why did I get into bike repair? And that's because I was cheap and poor in university and high school. So like, you know, and then, you know, you start tinkering a little bit and then you realize, you know what, this is not that difficult. And at least the stuff that you have to do most of the time, like flat repairs or brake adjustments, that's doable. That's totally doable, right? And then some of the more complicated stuff, I taught myself only because I really enjoy that kind of stuff. I studied engineering in university, and I just love like mechanical things. Anything where I can get my hands involved is kind of fun. Yeah, and not everybody enjoys necessarily the mechanical side of it, but even for those folks, I think some of the basic stuff is very doable. So it's not the most ideal, obviously, doing it virtually, but I'll do my best today, and I hope you guys can gain as much from it. And if you have any questions, just put it in the chat box on the side, and I'll check it regularly just to answer any of the questions. And what I'll do is I'll bring the camera as close to the things that I'm working on so that you can see what I'm doing. So yeah, please fill out the questions in the chat box. I would really appreciate that. Okay, so actually, any questions so far before I move about myself or about the hub at all? Okay, I'll move on. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time for questions. Okay, so the first thing I want to get into is bike safety. Okay, and you guys can type in the chat box if you want to. If you don't know, there's like a little button at the bottom of the screen that says chat. If you click on that, the window opens up to your right. So let me ask you folks, do you know what you have to have on yourself and the bike to be legal on the road? Okay, so what you need, absolutely. If you said a helmet, you would be wrong. You think a helmet would be mandatory, right? But a helmet isn't. What you actually need is a bell on your handlebar, a functioning bell, or horn will do as well, and a front light and rear reflectors. You actually don't need a rear light. And the logic behind that is a car coming from behind you will shine its light on the reflectors. But if you are behind a car, they can't see you because their light is not shining on the reflectors of the front. So you need a front light and rear reflectors if you want to be legal. But I would suggest just get a rear light and a front light just to be safe. You know, it's just an added layer of protection. I think that's really important. The other thing I'll say is even if you don't have to wear a helmet, please get a helmet. Okay, so this is my helmet here. Whether you buy a $20 helmet from Walmart or Amazon, or you buy something a little bit pricey, more pricey, like helmets can go all the way up to $400. You know, racing helmets. And to be honest with you, there's there's not much of a value add to getting helmets that expensive. I would say if you spend like even the $20 helmets are just as safe because they all have to go through the same safety testing, right? So the CPSC tests them and makes sure that they all meet the minimum standards. So with the lighter helmet like this, you get a lot of vents, so your head stays cool. You see how many vents this has, like tons of them. It makes it really light, which means that they have to put more research and development into it. So it just ends up making the helmet a bit more expensive. You should also be changing your helmet every 2 to 5 years, with the exception of a crash. If you have a crash, if your helmet hits the ground hard, the rule of thumb is just get rid of it. You may not be able to see any cracks in it, but there may be hairline crack. And the way the helmet protects you is when your head hits the ground, it should crack. And that cracking is what actually protects your head, because all the forces in the cracking take up the impact. Okay, so please wear a helmet if you can. And if you want a helmet, come and see us. We don't have a ton. We get them once in a while. I'll try and hook you up. Okay, so that's at 15 Tobermory. So that's in terms of safety, you know, that's what rules of the road, what you need, and that's regulated by the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, OHTA. And if you don't have it, you can get a fine. I once got a fine during a bike blitz, and I didn't have my front light running. I don't have a battery. That's an excuse. I'll stick to it. And so the rule is it's half an hour before sunset till half an hour after sunrise is when you need to have your lights on. If you're a daytime rider, then you don't have to worry about having lights. And definitely you need a bell as well. Okay. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is maintenance. So regular maintenance. So if you don't think you want to do something as complicated as flat repairs or brake adjustments, there's some things you can do that are not that difficult. One is keep your chain oiled. Okay, so you can get them in a bottle like this, and you can get many different types. So you can see this one is a synthetic oil. Now, this one has Teflon in it, so it's not the best for the environment, I have to confess. However, it works really well, and the amount you use is very little. And most oils are Teflon based. You can get the natural ones as well. They tend to be a little bit thicker, but don't confuse that with grease. So this is grease, and you don't want to put this on your chain. And I've seen people put this on their chain. This is actually meant for like bearings and screw threads, pedals, stuff like that. You know, hubs. You don't want to use this on your chain. So what you want to use is something like this. What you can use instead is maybe a natural alternative, like you know, there's some things you can get out there that are made out of linseed oil. You can get mineral oil, which is also very good, which is pretty inert. The one thing I'll say is just make sure you don't get this on your hands, or wash your hands right after if you do happen to get it on your hands. Now, the final thing I'll say is that you can get this oil in two types, and it's very important that you get the right type. One of them is called wet lube, and the other one's called dry lube. And wet lube is for wet conditions, dry lube is for dry conditions. And when would you use a wet lube? To be honest, like if you're biking in really wet conditions and in snow, then you use wet lube. Toronto, luckily, is pretty dry. So I actually use a dry lube like this throughout the year. The wet lube, the downside is it's very sticky. It's almost like honey, maybe a little bit less sticky. But what happens is it gets your chain really dirty. And then once that gets dirty, it'll stick to your pants. And then cleaning the bike is a bit of a hassle. Then you have to clean the chain post winter. Most of the time when people will use wet lubes, it will be in the winter because you know there's snow and slush and salt and all that stuff on the road. But if you go to a bike shop, ask for a dry lube, and they'll give you something like this, something that's very fluid. It's almost like water, and it just flows really easily into the chain. The other thing you can do, and we'll look at flat repairs today, but do you know the most common reason for getting a flat? I would say at least half the flats that I see in the bike shop that I work in is actually not from something puncturing the tire. Believe it or not, it's actually from low air pressure. So what happens is you don't inflate your tire enough, and then you're biking, and then you hit a pothole or something hard on the road, like a curb. And what happens is because there isn't enough air in the tire just gets squeezed so much that it pinches the tube inside, right? So that's called a pinch flat. So every tire has a tube like this inside. So if I can show you, so here we have a tire, and this is the tube that would go inside the tire. So this tube, if it gets pinched, it will get a hole in it. So it's really important that you keep your tire inflated. And if you're wondering what the pressure should be, if you look on the side of the tire, almost every tire actually has a recommendation. So it's a little hard to see here, but let me see that. See, inflate to 45 to 60 PSI, pounds per square inch, okay? Does anyone know what a car tire is inflated to? It's inflated to about 30 PSI, right? So this goes to 40 PSI. The road bike in the corner over there, the very corner, that one goes to 120 PSI. So you can imagine that. So you may be asking, whoa, how come a road bike goes up to 120, but a mountain bike tire only goes up to like 40 PSI? Generally, the rule of thumb is the thicker the tire, the lower the pressure will be. I have an inflatable kayak that takes a lot of air that only goes up to 4 PSI. But at 4 PSI, that kayak is just as hard as the mountain bike tire at 40 PSI or the road bike tire at 120 PSI, right? So they're equally firm. There's some physics there. I myself am not completely sure about the science of it, but you know, I think there's more air, so it ends up creating more force within the tire for bigger objects. But I won't get into that. Okay, so I'll get more into that stuff as we do the flat repair. But just if you want to just do a very basic thing for your bike, keep your chain oiled and keep your tires inflated to the pressure recommended. And if you get a pump, let me just grab my pump here. If you get a floor pump like this, it'll have a little dial, as you can see, and this dial will go from 0 to 160. Which tells you that some tires do go up to that much pressure. But really, I mean, you'll most likely be using anywhere between 0 and 120 PSI. And you can read here. So as you inflate it, this needle kind of goes up, telling you how much air is in the tire. So this is an extremely good investment. You can get this online for not that much. Okay, so I got a question here. Can you put WD-40 on your chain? No, I would only recommend it as a last resort. I wouldn't put it on, only because WD-40 is also as much of a cleaner as much of it is a lubricant, right? The term 40 actually initially was supposed to suggest that it has 40 purposes. So, it's like kind of like a jack of all trade, master of none kind of a thing. But if you don't have anything on hand, like a bike oil, and then the only thing you have is WD-40, then sure, go for it. But know that it's not ideal. It's not very sticky. WD-40 is not viscous at all. It's very light, so it's not gonna damage your chain or stick to it for a long time. So you can definitely put some other oil in the future. But something like this is not that much. The only problem is COVID has really affected the supply chain for cycling this year. Most bike shops are sold out of bikes, and a lot of them are actually even sold out of lubes as well. But if you can find it, it's not too pricey. Something like this is like $4 per bottle, So thank you for that question for WD-40. So let's get to the fun part, actually. Let's look at how we can replace tube here. All right, so tire and tube. All right, so let's say you're biking along and all of a sudden you hear like a psh, and the air escapes from your tire, right? So that can happen. The other thing that can happen is you park your bike, you come back to it like a few hours later, and air's gone. And you're like, oh, what happened? There was air in it when I left. How come there's no air in it now? So what happens is you can get a very small object, like a puncture in the tube, and air will leak very slowly. And what that'll do is you might not know when you get that puncture. It's only when you come back a few hours later that you notice that there is a puncture in the tire. So that's called a slow leak, right? A fast leak would be, like you hit something like a curb, or there's something that goes through your tire and you get like a sudden psh, and you know that you've just lost all air, okay? So what's the first thing you can do? The first thing you can do is you have to get that wheel off the bike, right? Now, that can be half the challenge, to be honest with you, only if you don't know how to do it. All right, once you see how to do it, it's actually quite simple. So if you look at this bike here, so I'm gonna bring, actually, let me see if I can do this one here. Perfect. Okay, so if you look right here, for this bike, there is a quick release at the bottom here. If I pull this lever down, this tire should fall off. Now, if your bike doesn't have a quick release like this on this side, you will need a 15mm wrench. This is very tiny. Just to put it in perspective, you can see how big it is. It's not that big. And it's super thin and light. It's technically called a cone wrench, but you can use this to remove your wheel. The good thing about this is it's nice and small, but you will need it if instead of a quick release lever, you just have like nuts that attach to your fork. If that's the case, you just have to have this, otherwise you're kind of screwed. There are some tricks around it, and I'm happy to share. You can actually patch up that tube without removing the wheel completely. So I'll go over that with you later, okay? So here what we're gonna do is, if you have a look here, I'm going to take that lever, pull that down, okay? I'm gonna pull that lever down, And now the wheel should come off, but you notice it's actually not coming off. The reason for that is because the tire gets stuck in between the brake pads. Okay, you see these brake pads? The brake pad gets, is preventing the tire from coming off. It just gets stuck. So what you have to do is you have to release the brakes, okay? So for that, you take your thumb and index finger, all right? You pinch the brake here, and then you pull this little piece out. Okay, so it comes right out. And now you can see that I've just spread the brakes. All right, so let me do that again, just in case you guys missed it. So I'm gonna put it back in, just in the opposite way. So I'm gonna put that back in. So you're gonna take your thumb and index finger, pinch the brake, and then pull this little piece out. Okay, so once you do that, now, if you loosen the quick release lever, it should come right out. Okay, there you go. All right, so now that you've removed the wheel, the next step will be to, find out where the hole is. And you can either patch the tube or you can just put a new tube in. Now, a lot of folks will actually just put a new tube in. And the reason for that is because tubes are really cheap now. You can get a tube for like $3-4 in some shops. If you get lucky, $5-6, but definitely cheaper online. Or you can patch it up. I love patching tubes just because you can't really recycle tubes. And these things are synthetic, they're not natural rubber. And if it goes into a landfill, it'll probably stay there for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So these things don't degrade easily. They are very durable and very resistant to chemicals. That's one of the things that makes them great as a bike tube, but that's also something that makes them not very biodegradable, which is unfortunate. So if you can replace the tube, that's great. Just as an aside, I'll let you guys know, we actually did a jewelry making course with bike tubes and tires over the winter. It was awesome. And if you have to save those tubes, you can make some pretty cool jewelry with it. And if you folks leave me your email addresses, I can maybe forward some pictures to you. Okay, so you have your tire here, and let's assume that you have a slow leak. Okay, so not the one where like all the air left the tire. So what you can do, the first thing you have to do is let all the air out, even if there's a little bit left. Without that, you won't be able to remove the tire. Okay, so everybody see the valve right here? So what I'm going to do is just put my, before I do that, actually, let me just mention what you'll need to remove the tire. You just need this tool here. This is called a tire lever. It's just, it's super it's cheap. I think you can get a set of 3 for like $2 online. So essentially, you'll notice that it has this lip on one end. See that? And then you'll notice that there is a hook on the other end. Okay, so you're going to take that lip end. I'll show you what this end is for, but for now, you're going to take that lip end. Okay, tire. And you just need this tool here. This is called a tire lever. It's just, it's super I was just hearing myself. Okay. All right. So so I'm going to take the tire lever here, and I'm going to let all the air out. So you folks can probably hear all the air escaping, right? So just let all the air out. Just hold on to that. Okay. Now that all the air is out, I'm just going to squeeze it, make sure that all of it is out. Okay, the next step before you actually take the tire off, this is quite important, is just move it side to side so that the tire can be released from the rim. Okay. All right, great. We've done that. Now, one thing I want to mention is that people will sometimes call this whole thing the tire, but this is actually, the rubber part is the tire. The metal part is actually not even the wheel. It's actually called the rim. these little things here are called the spokes, these thin wires. And the spoke is attached to the rim using this thing called the nipple. So right, this thing here. And in the middle, you have the hub. And then you have the quick release lever here. And then you have the bearings, which are inside here. And every now and then you'll have to replace those bearings, which are a little bit more complicated, but definitely doable with the right tools. Okay, so now that I have really let all the air out and kind of release the tire from the rim, I can take my tire lever and remove the tire. So what you do is you take this end again, the lever end, you pull the tire back until you can see the edge of the tire, which is right there. I'm going to put it underneath the edge of the tire and pull it out like that. Can everybody see that? You can see a little bit of the tire coming out. Okay, so then I go sideways until I can release the whole tire. All right, so do that and then go sideways. It's a little hard to do it with the wheel facing the camera, but here, so let me see. So you do that. There we go. So once you get a little bit off, the rest becomes easy because the tension was keeping it in place. And once you remove a little bit, the tension is just released from the rest of it. So what you do is now you can go around and just remove the rest of it. Okay, there you go. Okay, so now you guys see that the one side of the tire is off. Okay, the next thing you have to do is remove the valve. So push the valve in, pull it out, and the valve comes right out. And then once you do that, you can pull the tube out, okay? And that's important because we still need to find out where the hole is in the tube. Now, if you're saying that I don't need to worry about that because I have a new tube, you still need to know where the hole is in the tube so that you can find out what caused the flat in the first place, right? There's no point putting a new tube inside this tire if whatever caused the flat is still in the tire, right? So we're gonna put some air in this tube and see where the air is leaking from. Once we do that, we can match that up to the tire and find the culprit, okay? But notice what I've done is I actually haven't removed the tire completely. I've left it on for two reasons, because it saves me time, but also for you folks, I think if you might have difficulty getting that both sides on. So it's one less step that you have to worry about. Okay, so I'm gonna put this aside. And then let me take, because that tube doesn't have a puncture, let me take one that does have a puncture, like one like this, right? Okay, so you notice actually one thing is that this tube has a different kind of a valve than this one right here, right? So this is actually called a Presta valve. And this one here is called a Schrader valve. This is the type that you have in your car, right? The only thing is you can't really use a car pump because car pumps don't really go more than 40 because car tires never go more than 40, right? But you know, a bicycle pump will go up to 160, as you saw. And this is Presta valve. So the main difference is there's a little nut at the tip here. So if you want to put air into this valve, you got to loosen that nut first, okay? Otherwise, you can't put air in there. This is what you find on a lot of newer bikes these days. But to be honest, this valve is actually more dependable. In terms of chronology, this actually came later in time than this one. The reason why we use this is because it's thinner and you don't have to drill a very wide hole in a thin rim, thereby making that rim weaker at that point. So with this, you gotta drill a bigger hole. So you might find these more common, let's say in really wide rims, right? But more than that, like this has kind of taken over on new bikes, especially like high-end hybrids and road bikes and mountain bikes. So just so you know, so those are two types. Now, what I'll do is I'll also have a look later what you can do with the pump. to, you can use your pump with either of these. You just need an adapter with these. So I'll show you what you can do with that. Okay. Okay. So what we'll do now is we'll take our pump and we'll put some air in the tube to see where the air is leaking from. Okay. So I'm taking my pump here and then I'm just going to look at this pump head. It's got a hole for a Schrader and then a hole for a Presta. A bigger one.
Hi, may I speak to Peter Garden?
Sorry?
Oh, okay, hi. I just got an email from you about a book I had ordered. My name is Fatin. It's called Storying Violence, the book. So I was wondering, because I thought that the cover, like there was a green cover. Is it a green cover or is it?
Oh, sorry, Fatin.
Oh, okay.
Fatin,
The image isn't different, right? Okay.
I'm gonna ask him to mute. Okay, he's muted.
No worries, no worries. I'm always up for a good laugh. Yeah. Okay, so back to the pump. So you'll notice that the pump actually has these two heads on them, right? There's a Schrader, the bigger hole, and the smaller one. Some pumps just have the one, but the valve works with both. So that's pretty fancy, eh? Like it'll have just one hole, but when you pull this lever, it'll automatically adapt to the kind of valve you have. So those are a little bit fancier. Some people like these, some people like the other ones, you know, both have their, can you show the labels for the Presta and Schrader? Ah, hi Danielle. Do you mean, oh, right, okay. Great, so Danielle actually pointed out something interesting. So you can see that this one, there's an S right there for the Schrader and P for Presta, okay? The easy way to remember it perhaps is P for petite, because that valve is like a smaller valve, and P for Presta, right? And S for Schrader, all right? So I hope that answers the question. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is take our pump head and then insert that into the bigger hole. And the trick here is to go all the way in, okay? Often folks will just like put it just a little bit in and then just do that. And the air's not, that's not gonna work. There is a little valve inside that needs to be depressed so that it can push air out, okay? It's a one-way valve, right? Because as it's putting air in the tire, that air can't come back out. Otherwise, you know, you're not gonna have a inflated tire. So essentially put that all the way in so that you can depress that little pin inside and you can feel it and do this. And the next thing I'm gonna do is inflate it until I can hear some air coming out of this. Okay, so you should be able to hear some hissing sound coming from it. So the best way to find that, I find, is you bring this very close to your cheek. If you can't hear it, you can sometimes feel it on your cheek or somewhere around there. So I'm going around, going around, going around, going around, going around. Oh, I hear something. Okay, so there's a hole right there. Okay, I don't know if you guys can hear that. I'll bring that close to the mic. But it's very, it's not a very loud noise that you can really hear clearly. But what is super interesting, guys, is that the hole is not on the outside. It's on the inside of the tube. What I mean by that is the inside being the side that's on the side of the valve. This side is the side that's touching the tire. So what might that mean? What does it mean that there's a hole on the inside? So it could be one of a few things, but the most common reason for that is your wheel will have this thing called the rim tape, okay? This is very important. This happens once in a while that this gets misplaced or broken, and then you get a flat. So if you look at the wheel, there's a tape on top of the metal part of the rim. So let me remove that And so you just get this round piece of strip. Sometimes it's like glued on tape, right? Sometimes it's something just like another rubbery piece. And then you'll see that there are the nipples that attach to the spoke coming out from the other side. And they're sharp, actually. And if you don't have this, or it broke, then it will cause that tube to rub against the nipple and go flat, perhaps right away, or perhaps like over a few days. Yeah. So Vijay has a great point. You could put that tube in a bucket of water. You know, when I worked at a bike shop, we would do like a couple hundred flats a day, right? So most of the time, just pumping it up quickly, even with the compressor, would tell you right away where the hole is. So it really helps to narrow down the cause of the flat. So you could do that, but you know, just for time's sake, the only time I would recommend that though is that if you can't find the hole by inflating the tube, that the hole is so small that you can't even hear air coming out of it. And then if you put it in a bucket of water, you can sometimes see little bubbles coming out, right? So in that case, yeah, that's a great question. So you can do that as well. But I would advise like trying to just hear for it first, just to save time. Okay, so once you do that, you can then put this rim tape back on. So let's say you have a new one. If this one's broken or damaged, in an emergency, you can actually just use electric tape, right? It doesn't last very long, but because it's not a tough material, but it will definitely get you out of a tough situation. So what we're going to do is put this back on and just make sure you see that. So it just goes on top of those nipples over there, and then we can do the rest. Okay. The only trick here is just to make sure that you don't cover the valve hole, right? Otherwise you can't put the valve through this. Okay. So the next thing is the tire. Now, remember earlier I said that it's probably easier to not take the tire off, but let's say by mistake you did take it off. There's no worries about that. You know, we can always still work with that. So here's the tire. I know that the hole wasn't on the outside, so it wasn't something that went through the tire. But let's say the hole was on the outside. What I would do is take my fingers, put them on the underside of the tire, and then just go around, okay? And you want to go slowly, because if there's something sharp in there, you don't want to cut yourself, you know? And I've done like thousands of, you know, tube and tire replacements. I've only cut myself twice, but I think that was twice too many. If I'd just been more careful, I could have prevented that. And that's not to say that, you know, it couldn't have been worse. You know, I just got lucky. But just be careful. The other thing you can do is, let's say the hole is at about, let's say 3 o'clock, right? So it's about perpendicular to the valve here. So right here, where my index finger is. So what you can do is you can actually look at the tire at 3 o'clock, right? And see if there's something there. And also, this is only doable if your tire is still on the wheel. The moment you take it off the wheel, you've just like changed the orientation of it completely, and now you don't know where north is, right? But if it's on the wheel, just check 3 o'clock, and also check 9 o'clock, because you might have flipped the wheel by mistake, right? So just find the symmetric opposite of that. So 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, right? So Danielle says here, I had to do that once last year. Yeah, see, Danielle had to use the water bucket trick in the past. Okay, so once you know where the object is, you can pull it out. Sometimes you can't see it from the top because it got really embedded in. You'll have to pull it out from the inside, but most of the time you can see it from the outside, and you can just like pull it out with your fingers. You can also carry a pair of tweezers, or if you're doing it at home, you can do that at home. It's easy. Now, the important thing here is, unless you have a gash or like a slash in your tire, let's say you biked over a big piece of glass, you don't actually have to replace that tire. So if there's like a tiny little puncture, it's okay. If it's more than a few millimeters and the tube is poking out when you inflate the tube, then you can actually replace the tire. You can also carry with you what's called a tire patch. And essentially it's a little emergency patch for your tire. It's not meant as a long-term solution. It's meant to get you home and then, or to a bike shop where you can get a new tire, right? So I would love to show you guys what I carry in my little bag so that during emergencies, let me see if I can pull it out. All right, folks, I'm back. All right, so I have a little bag that I carry in my pannier. I'll talk about what a pannier is. It's going to change your life. So essentially, I have a little patch kit, and the patch kit's got the glue in it, and it's got this tire patch I was saying. It's not a patch for the tube, it's for the tire. And these are great. They just help to patch up your tire in an emergency. And essentially what you do is you just peel it off like a sticker, and then you find the gash in the tire and you just insert it from the underside. You wouldn't put it on the outside because the moment it hits the road, it's going to come off. So you just want to put it from the inside and patch up that gash. All right. So that's one thing. So that I have a patch kit with me. I also have a portable pump. These are awesome. So this is, I treated myself on this one. It's a little fancy, but believe it or not, even though it's fancy, it's actually less useful than the ones that come with a little hose. Those are the best. I chose looks over functionality. So, so here you can see that it's actually got the dial, which is awesome, right? So it tells you the PSI, and it's got a smart head on it. So it automatically recognizes the shredded or Presta valve. So you just pull this and you're good to go. The cool thing about this one is that you can do high volume. So you can actually get more air in with each stroke. One of the many complaints of a portable pump is that it takes forever. So try to stay away from the small ones unless you really need it to be portable. The other thing is if you can get the ones with the hose, those are awesome. Like when I am inflating this tire, I'll show you guys later, but I have to hold the wheel up with one hand and pump like this, right? And it's a real pain in the butt. So what you can do is if you actually end up getting the one with the hose, you can use it just like a floor pump. You can put the wheel on the bike or just leaning on the side of the road, and then you can just inflate it like a regular pump. So these actually, you just have to use one hand and pump against the valve. And often you end up actually damaging the valve because you're pushing against the valve, right? So I'll show you some ways to mitigate that. But so this is something I carry. The other thing I carry is gloves. These mitral, I mean, this is an alternative. This is a more durable one, but you can get those medical gloves as well. They don't last as long, but you know, these are awesome. And I also have a multi-tool. So if you can get one of these, it's awesome. It has all the different Allen keys you need for your IKEA furniture, even, or your bike. It's just a good tool to have in general, you know, because it's like so useful. It has a flathead on it and a Phillips, which is awesome. It's even got a Torx head, which is that star-shaped one. And then it's got a chain tool, you know, and it's got these number 8 and number 10 open-ended wrenches on it as well to make some adjustments with the derailleurs sometimes or brakes. And it's got these spoke wrenches as well to adjust. If your wheel kind of starts wobbling over time, you can play with the nipples as we talked about earlier to make it straight again. So anyways, we'll get more into that, hopefully in a more advanced class in bike repair. So stay tuned for that. All right, so now that you have found out where the...
Shuaib, there's a question. There's a question about a tool, the name of the tool.
Yes, this is called a multi-tool because it has multiple tools in it, you know? You can get them in different types. You can get them with like just the ounce. But if you want to do some more advanced stuff, you can get them with something like this that will allow you to replace the chain as well. So this is a chain tool on this side. And then you have the spoke tools right here. Then you have some open-ended wrenches here as well. So super awesome. You know, they range for anywhere from like, I've seen them on Amazon for like 10 bucks. And I try not to shop on Amazon, not to purchase signal, but just saying. But you can even go, you know, to some bike shop. I highly encourage supporting your local bike shop. It's not an easy business to survive in. So support them. You can get something like this, which I think this was like 30 bucks. It's a little bit more expensive, but I've had it for like 18 years now. So, okay, so multi-tool is the name of that tool. All right, so the next thing you want to do is if you do have a flat in that tube, now you have to patch it up, right? So you could just as well just get a new tube, all right? So here comes the part that is difficult for a lot of folks. How do you get the right tube from the bike shop, right? Because you're gonna see a rack with many, many different sizes of tubes, and you have to just buy one that's right for you. So the first thing you do, it might seem like intimidating, actually, once you know how to look for it, it's quite easy. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your tire and look on the side and see for some markings. There's going to be two markings specifically. One is the amount of pressure you need in that tube, and the other is the size of that tube. Okay, so I'm gonna go around. So I see the inflate to 35 PSI. Sorry, from 35 to 65 PSI, because this is a thinner tire. And then if you keep going around, oh, there's another arrow here. There's another thing here, and if you can see, there's a bit of an arrow. And what this arrow tells me is that when I put the tire back on the wheel should be moving this way, forward, okay? So we'll look into that as well. Oh, there you go, okay. So here, maybe if you can see it, I'll just read it out for you folks. It tells me that I need a 700 by 38C. Sorry, this tire is 700 by 38. So I need a tube that is 38 millimeters wide. So the first number that you see is actually the diameter of the tire, okay? But it's not the diameter from the outside to the outside. It's the diameter from the bead, which is this edge right here, to the bead on the opposite side, right here, okay? So that's the bead to bead diameter, okay? Also known as the bead seat diameter, BSD. So that bead, by the way, I don't know if you can tell, it's kind of shaped like a hook, like my nail catches on it if I try to pull on it, you know? And the rim actually also has a bead on the edge here. It kind of, my fingers kind of catch on that as well. So what happens is this bead hooks under this bead, and that is what prevents the tire from slipping under very high air pressure. Okay, so when we put this tire back on, we'll just have to be very careful to make sure that that bead is setting properly. Okay, so we'll definitely look into that as we put the tire on. Okay, so again, going back to the tire size. So I have to get a tire, a tube that is 700 by 38. Okay, so 700 is the, like I said, the diameter from bead to bead, and then 38 millimeter is the width of the tire. Really? So in terms of the size of this tire, you just need those two numbers, 700 for the diameter and 38 for the width. And if I go to a bike shop, I can actually get one that looks like this, 700. Now, this is the confusing part sometimes. It goes from 33 to 37. So tubes will always come in a range that they'll fit in, okay? So this one fits a 700 diameter, and from 33 millimeters wide to 37 millimeter wide tire, right? Mine's a 38, so just a 1 mil difference won't matter at all, because the next size up that we could find was 43 and up, right? So this is the closest one, and tubes will stretch, so it's not a huge deal. The one problem though is that I bought it in the Presta valve because that's all we have left. So it'll still work, you know, but it's not the valve that the tire came in. It came in the other tire, the Schrader valve. Okay. Now, just a quick FYI, you can actually use a Presta valve in a Schrader valve rim, but you can't do the other way around, because you can put a narrower valve in a bigger hole, but you can't put a bigger valve in a narrower hole. Okay, so there it is. Any questions about the tubes? Just let me know, actually. Okay, the chat box is open, folks. All right, so what we're gonna do now is we have removed the culprit from the tire. We're gonna put the tire back on the wheel. And so the first thing we do is put just the one side on. Okay, so just put the one side of the tire on. So I'm gonna go around and you can see, let me do that again. So I'm just gonna put the one side on, not both sides. Why do you not wanna put both sides on? Well, because you haven't put the tube in yet, right? So if you put both sides of the tire on, then you can't put the tube in. Or you'll have to do one extra step. You have to remove the one side off and then put the tube back in. So less work, right? So just put the one side on. And so now the one side is off, you can see. And on the other side, it should look like the tire is actually sitting in it. Okay. All right, perfect. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna grab our tube. And if this is not new, it could have a patch on it, right? So this is how you patch your tube. One of the things that folks often don't know, and I didn't know this when I actually started patching tubes, I did it the wrong way for many years until someone told me. So you'll get this glue, you're gonna get some patches like this, and some sandpaper, okay? And just 3 steps. Once you find the hole, clean the area around the hole by using sandpaper, okay? Next step is to put the glue around the hole, on and around the hole. Now the trick here is that you don't want to use too much. You just want a nice thin film of glue and that matches the size of the patch. If you put too much glue, you'll run into some trouble. And the reason for that, and so this is the part that I was saying that I didn't know. This glue has to dry before you put the patch on, okay? This is called vulcanizing glue. And what happens is there's a chemical reaction that happens between the glue and the patch and the tire. You know, I can understand why folks wouldn't know that, because most glue we have used is, you know, you gotta use it up before it gets dry. So you got to put this on, wait for that thin film of glue to dry, and then put the patch on, okay? And if you look at my tube, in my bike, I've got like 5 patches all the way around, or 6 of them. And I just want to use that tube as much as I can before I have to put a new tube in. So definitely, you could be proud of, you know, not buying an extra product if you can patch your tube up, right? So, so once you've patched it up, should I actually, give me one second. I actually have a patch kit here. So here's a brand new one, Arc tool. So you open it up, you're gonna get your patch. You're gonna get patches. This is a big one here, okay? And then there is a tiny one here, which works like 90% of the time. And then another medium-sized one here. Well, these guys really give you a lot of options. And then you have your sandpaper, okay? Now, if you wanna follow along, I'll show you how I usually do it. So I'll take my tube and I'll sand down the area that has the hole. And you saw earlier what we did, we pumped it up to see where the air was leaking from, or put it in the bucket. And then I'm gonna do this. And this has to be larger than the area of the patch, right? Go larger, because you don't want to risk it by not covering the whole surface area of the patch. So you see that? Now, what will happen is you don't want to put too much on, just enough, like I said earlier, and just wait for it to dry up. So I'm just going to wait a few seconds. And then it'll go from being like this liquidy shine to being kind of dull. And that's when you know that it's mostly dry, okay? Awesome. So now that it's got that dull kind of a look, which you can clearly tell that it's still there, you're going to take one patch, rip it. Now, this is the tricky part. Folks will sometimes try to peel off both the clear plastic film and the aluminum from the patch. That's going to damage the patch. So essentially what you want to do is just like peel it off and just leave that plastic on the other side. Okay, this side, this aluminum backing just goes. Then you take this and you find the area where the vulcanizing glue is, right there. And with the, not the plastic side, but the other side that you just took the aluminum off from, center that on the hole. You can see, like, at the moment it touches it, it starts to react and stick. Okay, so there you go. Perfect. So once you've done that, now, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, it's good to have a little bit of air in the tube. Okay, hopefully the hole's not so large that you have to work very quickly, but it's good to have a little bit of air in the tube because it gives it a nice round shape, which will be the shape that it takes inside the tire, right? If it's flat and you put the patch on, if you put it in the tire after that, it's going to stretch, right? And the stretching is going to make this patch come off. So if you can mimic the ultimate shape that this tube will take in the tire, then that patch will most likely stick even better. Okay, so once you've done that, the next step is putting it in the tire. So I'll take my valve here, right there. I'm going to go around and until I can spot the valve hole. So there's the valve hole right there. Sorry, I'm going off camera. There you go. Okay, so what I'm going to do now. Now, the thing is, the reason you want to do the valve first is if you don't do this first, the valve might not line up with the valve hole, right? So essentially, I'm going to look for the valve hole. You can see that in the background. So I'm going to put it through the rim tape first and then through the hole. And you can see that it's coming out from this side. Okay. Now what I can do is I'll pull the tire on top of the tube and put the tube in. Don't worry about putting the tire on the rim yet. We can do it one step at a time, and that's going to make it a lot easier. So I'm just going to go around and put the tube in. Now, again, like I said, very important that you have a little bit of air in the tube. If you don't do that, this tube will be flaccid and it will fall from the inside of the tire. And then there's a very high chance that you'll pinch it during installation, right? So this way, if there's a little bit of air in it, it'll want to stick to the inside of the tire rather than to the wheel itself. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean by that. So now that I'm putting that in, so look what happens. I haven't put the tire in yet, but when I shake it, the tube won't come out, right? That's because there's a little bit of air in that tube. The thing is, if you have too much air, you won't be able to put this tire back on. So I would say just do the very minimum so that it can have a nice round shape, okay? So in fact, I actually do have too much air in this. I'm gonna let a little bit of air out. Okay, awesome. And now what I can do is push this side of the bead onto the bead that we saw earlier on the inside of the rim. Okay, now you want to start ideally with where the valve is, right? Now here in my case, the valve is a little stuck, so I'm just going to pull it until it comes out all the way. Okay, you don't want that valve stuck inside, deeper within the tire. So once you do that, now grab the bead and push that onto the rim and underneath the bead of the rim. Okay, do you see that? So I'm going to do that and go around. I'm going to keep going around. Now, this can happen, and this happens often. In the bike shop that I've worked in, I've seen people kind of like fix their own flats, and then you hear a very loud bang, right? And what essentially happened is they got the tube pinched during installation. And if it doesn't, blow up at that point, it can sometimes blow afterwards, while they're riding, which is even more dangerous. So just make sure that no part of the tube is visible and getting stuck between the rim and the tire when you do the installation, right? So as I put the tire on, I'm always checking to see if the tube's all the way in the tire. So push it in and then push the tire on. Okay, so push the tube in, then push the tire on. Okay, so eventually you're going to come to a point where there'll be a little bit left. Okay, and this is always the hardest part for anybody who does a flat repair. Like this part right here. Okay, now the reason why it doesn't want to go in is because the tire is actually made smaller in diameter than the wheel, than the rim itself. And you may be able to guess why. It's because, you know, under pressure, you don't want it to pop out, right? So it has to go underneath that hook in the metal part of the rim. So it's made a little bit smaller so that you can go underneath that hook. So you can see that there's a little bit of bead sticking right here. Now, if you're a champ or you get lucky and have a tire that's a little loose, you can sometimes just like push it in with your fingers and it'll just go in, right? Or if you've been doing it for a while, you know, you get lucky and it kind of goes on easily. I wouldn't attribute my strength to this. I would just say it's like one of the looser tires, you know? So what I can do is I will remove that just to show you guys what other techniques you can use to put the tire on. So here we go. There we go. So you come to this point where this tire just won't go in, okay? And you're struggling. And there is a technique that a lot of mechanics use that really help, and non-mechanics as well, folks know. So essentially what you want to do is look at that transition where it's in and just out. Instead of using your fingers to push it in, there isn't a lot of strength in these fingers, right? But you can use your whole upper body to your advantage, a lot more muscles, right? So grab where it's just out with both hands, if you want, more energy there, and then pull it onto the rim. See that? And then just go around and then just pull it. And keep going around and eventually you'll get the last bit on, okay? So let's see. Somebody's asking, Vijay, can we use these patches for other kinds of inflatable things? You know, I have used them on those children's like swimming pool floaty things, but the problem is like there is nothing on the outside resisting the air pressure, right, of that patch. The patch on the tube is being pressed against this tire, which is what keeps it in place. But there isn't really anything for those objects. So you can try it, but I wouldn't put too much air in that thing if you're putting a patch on. Okay, so the tire's on, it's facing the right way. The last thing I have to check is I have to pull the tire back, and all I should be able to see is that tape, that rim tape that I mentioned earlier, the tape that prevents the sharp nipples from puncturing the tube. So what I'm going to do is just pull the tire back and just check that I can't see any tube. All you should be able to see is just the rim tape. So I go around, and if you do see it, it's tempting to use the tire lever to help it in. Don't do that. This is going to cause, this edge here is quite sharp usually, and it'll cause a flat. There are some tire levers that are made to like resist puncturing. So I have one here. It's not as sharp and it's a little bit wider. So it kind of is a little bit easier. And you can buy ones that are, they say it's puncture proof, right? So once you've done that, now you can inflate it to the appropriate pressure. So for that, you go around and then you have a look. Go around, and it tells me that it should be a minimum 35 PSI and a maximum of 65 PSI. Okay, so you can read the dial on your pump. The reason I don't usually recommend just using the pressure gauge in your fingers is because I often play this like fun game with folks, tell them to guess what the pressure is in the tire. And if it's up to 65, when it's at 20, sometimes people will say, oh, that feels like it's hard enough, right? So it should be like hard, quite hard, but I don't want to say like how hard because it's subjective, right? So if you have a pressure gauge on your pump, great. If not, you can even buy them separately. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is just a reverse of what we did earlier. So if you have a look here, okay, so you did put the tire on and facing the right way, but it kind of defeats the purpose if you end up putting it backwards during installation. So we're going to make it face forward, put it into the dropout right here. Okay, so let's see here. And then I'm going to, just like when we took it off, turn this. Okay, now this is the a little tricky here, which you know, can be a bit problematic. How tight should this lever be right here, right? So what you want to do is turn this nut on the other side until you feel some resistance on this lever, only at the halfway through, okay? So it's not, I don't feel any resistance right now at the bottom, but as I come to the halfway point, it feels like it's a little tight. Once you know that it's resisting at the halfway point, you can push it all the way in. Okay. The next thing to remember is that the wheel goes in straight and centered in the fork. If it's leaning to one side or the other, then it will rub on the brake pads. Okay. So I wouldn't use like a fender for reference, just because the fender itself can be a bit to one side like this one is. So then the ultimate test will be just putting your brakes back on and then seeing if the brakes are rubbing on the wheel. So I'm going to put this back on, and just like we took it off, I'm going to take my thumb and index finger, pinch the arms of the brake caliper, you see that? And then put this little metal piece here. We saw that earlier, this piece right here. It's called the noodle. Put the noodle into its holder. Right there. There you go. It's not, I don't hear any sounds as I inflate it. So that tells me that the wheel went in straight. If not, loosen it again, you know, center it, put it back in. Now, if it is leaning to one side, you're going to get this. It's rubbing, and then it'll come to like an abrupt stop. Okay, so any questions so far about how to repair a flat or how to get it back in the fork? Just going to give you guys a few seconds. If you have any questions, just let me know. Okay, all right. Now it's the same thing for the back wheel. The only challenge with the back wheel is that you have that derailleur, right? The derailleur is this part here, so-called because it derails the chain. It's actually a French word. And you need to move that derailleur out of the way of the gears right here so that the wheel can come off. But just like the front wheel, we're going to start with releasing the brakes. So we're going to release the brake here so that the wheel doesn't get stuck. And then if I can move the bike a little bit further forward, you folks can see what I'm going to do. So in this case, let's say I'm going to take the quick release lever off from the other side. Okay. And now you can see that it kind of gets stuck in the derailleur here, right? So this can give you a lot of problems, but if you know what to do, it's actually not too difficult. You want to take this derailleur, push it back from the front, okay? Do that, and then it comes right out. See that? Sorry, I got to stand in the way. So push that out, and the wheel comes right out. Get the chain off, and it comes right out, okay? And the same thing to put it back on. You just put it from here, get the chain around, push this out of the way, and put it back in. I'm going to hold off because the space is a little tight here, but kind of you get the idea. The derailleur has to be pushed back for the wheel to go back in, and the chain has to go around the gears. Okay. All right, so let's see here. So what, just to summarize, what have we learned? You could get a patch kit if you want, or you could carry a tube. One thing I can recommend is that when you're on the road, it can be a bit stressful to patch up a tube. So if you don't want to be wasteful, just waste one tube, okay? So carry one tube with you and then put that new tube in when you get a flat. When you go home, you can patch up that one that got a flat, and then you can keep rotating between those two tubes. Sometimes, you know, especially when it's like cold, if you're biking throughout the winter, if it's -5, -10 outside, it can be, you know, risky to stay out in the cold and do a patch job, right? I have at times pre-COVID, you know, set up shop inside a TD Bank or something like that. But usually you won't have that privilege. Or if you just want to get home because you're stressed, or you have to get to work because you're getting to work and you know, you'll be late if you try to patch up a tube. It's good to carry one tube spare and then just rotate between the two. So yeah, so there you go. So that's that. You might want to carry a, like I said, if you don't have a quick release, you can carry this cone wrench as a wrench for your nuts, for your wheels to get them off. Multi-tool, that's it. At the very minimum, you will need a tube and a portable pump. Okay. And that's it. Okay, so what I would like to, what I would like to do next is actually show you guys the kind of repair and maintenance you can do on top of this. Much appreciated. Thank you, Shelley, for joining us. You know where to find us. If you need any help with your bike, just come on into the hub. Sorry, you can't come in right now. You'll have to drop your bike off. Yeah, so the other things you can do is adjust your brakes as well. It's a little bit beyond the scope of this, but I still want to talk about it a little bit. It's not a very hard adjustment. Really what it comes down to often for folks is adjusting the tension. So, you know, when you're pulling your brake lever, you find that you're pulling it all the way to the handlebar, or it feels quite loose. And then you have to adjust your cable tension, which you can actually do just with a multi-tool, which is, you know, so useful for that. The other thing you might need is brake pads. Eventually, your brake pads will wear and you'll have to replace the pads. So they come like this in a package, and they can be anywhere from, I've even seen them as low as $3 all the way up to $10, you know, for $15 for some fancy high-end ones. You can also get certain ones that are made for the winter or wet conditions. The other thing is, if I can show you, is my bike. Please don't laugh. It's seen a lot of winters. Okay, so I have a pannier in the back, which is awesome, which is where I keep everything. It's that thing over there, and it's called pannier, not pannier, which I've heard many people call it. It's just as delicious, but different objects, you know. So this is what actually I carry, and it's so cool because it hooks on to my rack, right? And I've had this for many years, and it just makes life so easy, especially if you bike in the summer, because your back gets really hot and sweaty if you have something on your back. It also lowers the center of gravity, so it's just super convenient. And if you're doing groceries, you can just put everything in there. So there is the pannier. We're trying to actually work with the sewing hub, who you all met earlier today, and make some panniers. So stay tuned for that. Let's see how that goes. So you can see that I can just, it just goes on there and just hooks on. You need two hands, with one hand, there you go. But what I wanted to mention is that some bikes actually have disc brakes. You see that right here? My bike has disc brakes, and they are awesome. The reason I like them is because they don't wear away the rim surface. You know, for folks that bike throughout the year, I've had many times in my bike shop where the rim surface is so worn that you have to just get new wheels, and that's quite expensive actually, because you have to get, you know, you have to buy the spoke and the hub and the rim all together. So that doesn't happen. It also brakes a lot better, disc brakes, right? They're great for the winter. I've been biking through the winter for the last decade or so, and
I couldn't do it as easily with this. The other thing I do in the winter is I actually get studded tires, which are tires with like little metal studs in them. And essentially they help with biking on ice and snow. So disc brakes are great. Oh, the other advantage of disc brakes is that if your wheels wobbly, it doesn't affect your braking because you just brake on this thing called the rotor or the disc, right? And the one downside with them is that the pads, there are quite a few number of pads you can get in the market, and there isn't like 1 or 2 standards as you have with rim brake pads, right? They also add a little bit of cost to the bike, but even kids' bikes, like I've seen youth bikes that come with this on cheaper bikes, as well as they scale up the economy of producing these. The other thing I would highly recommend is getting a lock. This is my favorite lock. It's like a folding lock. It folds nice and small. You see that? Now, I will admit that it's quite safe as far as locks go, but not as safe as a U-lock. But one important thing when you lock up your bike is not just what lock you use, it's where you lock it. So you should always be locking up your frame and rear wheel together to the post that you're locking to. If you lock just your frame, your wheels are still vulnerable, right? So folks can steal that as well. So always lock up the rear wheel and the frame together. Then the only thing that's exposed is really your front wheel, right? So then for that, you can actually just use a cable or use a second lock, or sometimes take the wrist if you like it. So as far as locks go, you can see I have a U-lock here. Always better to use a U-lock. If you can, I would highly recommend using a U-lock. These are very strong. These require a key. You can use a cable lock, but I almost always recommend using cable locks unless you feel pretty safe where you lock it up. But I still don't feel comfortable giving the advice of using a cable lock. You can use this as a secondary lock to lock up your front wheel, for example. So yeah, if you can, definitely get a U-lock. You can get them, the kryptonites and the Abus locks, which are very famous, can be quite expensive, but you can even get some other ones that are not as expensive but still pretty good. So this would essentially go through the seat tube here and the wheel. So let me just give you a quick little tour, as I promised earlier, of the bike shop, because we do a lot of work here with bikes. We recently bought a trailer, and this trailer will take, can you see it? This trailer will take, there you go. This trailer will take about 600 pounds. So we use it for community events, which is quite exciting. We have group rides as well. So we have all these bikes that we use for group rides in the 3 seasons. So let's go to let's go over to the bike shop here. And so this is the bike shop, and we recently, I actually built these benches a couple of weeks ago. We had those ones over there that are kind of like, they're okay, but they don't stand up to abuse that well. These are rock solid. Like, I hate to disappoint, but I'm not that strong to lift these and move them. They're really strong. This is what you would use if this is called a throwing stand. This is what you'd use if your wheels are kind of wobbly, and you can make it straight on this stand. You have a little gauge here that tells you where the wheel's wobbly. The other good thing is, as you can see, we build and give bikes out to the community for free. So if you need a bike, please leave your email address in the chat box. I'll put my email address there as well. Get in touch with us. We'll get your age, your height. We don't need your age, just your height, what kind of riding you want to do, and we can match you with a bike. But you can see we have bikes here. I recently put on some hooks just so that we can organize them a little better. We still haven't used the TV. I know. I'm waiting till the day we can plug that puppy in. Okay, and we actually recycle in keeping with the ethos of this whole program, community reduce reuse. we recycle like hundreds of pounds of metal every 2 weeks, you know, because we get so much bikes that go through this bike shop. You can see all these tubes, we'll wash them up. And one thing you can do actually, these make really good tie downs, you know, so for your rack, your bicycle rack. And you can see here we have all the parts. We have some tools here as well. It's not that organized. I'm only going to half open it. Okay. So there we go. There's a lot of windows. We get a lot of light here. I'm only bragging about the shop because I hope you guys will get involved come post-COVID when we can have more folks in here. We're just a little bit, you know, careful right now. So I try to be here as much as I can. Right now, we're taking drop-ins for anyone who wants tune-ups. Please drop your bikes off. We're more than happy to work on them. We wish you could stay in here with us when we did it so that you could learn from it as well. But, you know, these are hard times. So we just have to do the best with what we have. So, yeah, so we got tons of parts over there as well. So anytime a bike comes in that's donated, we just got this awesome, lovely person donated this bike. I was like, oh, you can't see it. Sorry. There you go. This one here and this one. And they're quite vintage and really nice, actually. Like, I think anyone who has one of these is going to be really happy. So we're going to tune them up and give them out to the folks in the community. So let me know if you need a bike, please. I am more than happy to get one in your hands. And I just love to see more people in this community get cycling, because we don't actually have any bike shop around here, not that I'm aware of, you know, and it's a little upsetting, you know, catch-22, you know, like unless you have more people riding, you don't see bike shops, but if you don't have bike shops, you don't have a lot of people riding, and there's the infrastructure component to it as well. They're slowly putting in bike lanes, which I'm really happy about. So you can always message to Councillor Peruzza, who is pretty involved, like I found, you know. I'll let you guys, you know, get in touch with him, let him know that we need more bike infrastructure in the neighborhood so that more people can bike, and not just bike, but bike safely, you know. Okay, so I'm going to open up the floor for questions. Vijaya, thank you for the email. I appreciate it. I'll add it to that. And if you need a bike, Vijaya, let me know. Anybody else? Any questions? Maybe we can unmute the mics.
Shuaib, I'm still waiting for my bike.
Who is this?
Vijaya.
Okay, I'll get to you, Vijaya. I'm just, we have like so many people on that list. But I promise I'll get it to you soon.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Amazing. I have a question. Can you change, if your brake is like the normal brake, can you change it to a disc brake? Or
Yep.
vice versa?
The simple answer is no. One thing you can do is you can change. The reason I say that is because, let me see if I can pull up a wheel that has a disc brake. Okay. So this bike here, so this wheel has this thing attached to it. It's called the disc brake flange. And this is what the disc rotor goes onto with 6 bolts. Now, you'll have to get a new wheel, and you have to get a fork that has the mount for the disc brake itself. Now, that's the cheapest way to do it. So then you'll have disc brakes in the front and then rim brakes in the back. Because 80% of the braking is done by the front brakes, some people are okay with that, you know, just having disc in the front and then rim brakes in the back. Otherwise, you'll have to get somebody to weld like a little mount for the disc brakes for the frame as well. And at that point, it just becomes, you know, financially unfeasible to do that. So short answer, I would say, is no.
Okay, thank you. I have a second question. One of the spokes on my wheel broke. So how do you fix that?
Yeah, great question. So you can replace that spoke only with one that is the same length, right? So we have what are called blanks, essentially spokes that come really long. And then we take the one that broke on your wheel, measure it to the same length, cut it off. And then we have a tool that threads the spoke once you size it. And then we have that stand that I showed you earlier, the touring stand. We use that to make sure that once you've installed the spokes, that it's straight. That I will say is one of the last things most folks will learn as a mechanic, because it's a little bit more involved. Definitely building a wheel is way more complicated than just replacing one spoke. And I remember the first wheel I built, it was straight, but it was in really bad shape. So it's quite an art, I would say, not to discourage anyone who wants to pick it up, but it does take a little bit of skill to do.
So for my broken spoke, can I bring it to the hub and get help?
Of course, yeah, anytime.
Cool.
I'm here till 8 today, and then I'm here on Saturday as well, if you want to drop it off.
All right, I'll get in touch with you.
Yeah, please.
Anybody else in the group who has some like bike problems, mechanical, their bikes broke or something? This is your chance to ask Shuaib. It's been very, very informative so far.
I have a question for you. So
Yes.
what do you do if you're braking and your brakes make too much noise? Is that because of rusting?
Great. Well, not great, but I have the answer to that question. So what you can do, the reason why you get that noise is from the brakes vibrating against the rim. And that's caused by, it can be a few things actually, but the most common reason is if the brake pads are not parallel or if they're not towed in, right? Sometimes making the brake pads parallel to the rim just fixes it. But sometimes you'll have to do what's called towing in. So let me show you what I mean by that. So if you have your bike here, your brakes here, these pads right here have to be, can you see actually? Let me just see if I can bring it closer.
Yeah, yes, I can see.
Yeah, so let me grab my multi-tool and you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to grab my number 5, which is the most common one from the brakes. So put it in there. And if I loosen this, you can see this just moves up and down. That's not how you want it, right? While I'm on the topic, I'll just quickly show you guys like what's happening here. So sometimes you can't get it to be parallel because if someone else worked on the bike, they didn't do it correctly, or from the factory it wasn't right. So you'll see that your brakes actually have quite a few number of parts, right? And this can be a bit intimidating only if you don't know like why there are so many parts. So you have your brake here. Now you'll have to replace it if you'll see that there's a line going down the middle. That's called the wear gauge or the wear line. If the pads don't have these grooves in them, you see the 2 grooves. If these grooves are gone, or you can't, the rubber is really close to the wear line, or you can't even see the wear line that it's worn so much, then it's time to get new pads. So let's say you just got new pads, right? Or if you just want to correct a mistake that was made earlier, you're going to have these parts. Okay. Sorry. There you go. You're going to have these parts. Okay. So you'll notice that there is one part here that's shaped like a cone. It's actually not flat. It's flat on one side, on this side, but on the other side, it looks like a cone. See that? Or I should say more like a cup, not cone. So then you'll notice that these 2 are shaped the other way. These are more like cones. And what's cool is these 2 will match like this. So the curve, the one that curves out fits into the one that curves in like that. And then you have the same for the other side as well. So there's one here that goes like that. And then you have your little washer, which is not the most crucial, but it's really important that you get this to match the way it's supposed to. Now, it doesn't matter if you put this one in first or this one in first, as long as you're consistent on both sides. Okay, on the other side, you'll notice that the, one is a bit thicker than the other, right? So the thicker one, if you put it in first. Now, to be honest with you, it does matter a little bit, but you know, I won't get too much into that. You can still make it work by putting either one first. It also doesn't matter if you do it this way or the other way, as long as these match properly, right? So I don't mean to use gendered terms here, but the male and the female parts have to kind of match properly, okay? And so I'm gonna check the other side. And then I can see on this side that the thicker washer is in first. So I'm gonna put this one in first. And like I said, it doesn't matter if it goes in like this or the other way. So like this. Okay, now, before I put the other one on, I'm gonna put this into the slot in the brake, okay? And then I am gonna put this one on here. And then we take this and we put that here, okay? So the last thing I did was put on that little nut that keeps everything in place. So now I'm gonna take my tool. Now this is the part that confuses a lot of people. So you have to have it at the right height and the right angle. If it's like this, whereas like at an angle, that's not right. If it's too high, super dangerous because it'll blow out your tire. If it's too low, it's just not gonna give you effective braking power. So you wanna have it at the right height and the right angle this way. But the other angle, which answers your question, Vijaya, is that it has to be parallel to the rim. So what we do is you wanna make sure that this pad has the same amount of gap in the front as it does in the back, okay? And then if it still squeals when you brake, then what you can do is you can tilt the front of the pad a bit further in. And that's why it's called towing in your brake pads, because the toe of the brake pads is inward, okay? So toe in. A lot of folks will have the heel in, and that's what makes the pad squeal. So towing in helps a lot. The other time it can squeal a lot is if you have really dirty rims, right? Ironically, it can also squeal when it's super clean, right? So like somewhere in between where you've been biking and it's a little dirty, usually with towing in, it shouldn't squeal, okay? Now, one way to make it parallel to the rim, if you are having difficulty doing it on your, you can squeeze your brake lever here, and that'll push the brake pads against the rim, thereby making it parallel, okay? And it'll give you visual feedbacks. So then you can tighten this, and then you're good. The other thing you wanna do, once you've done that, is make sure that the brakes are not leaning to one side or the other. So in this case, you notice when I squeeze my lever, assuming that I've done both sides correctly, that this side moves a lot more than this side, okay? So what you can do is you can actually pull this side a bit further away so that it doesn't rub. Right now it's rubbing on that side because it's much closer to the rim than this side. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our multi-tool and we're gonna take this one, the Phillips, and we're gonna put that into, there's a tiny little screw over here. So let me see if I can bring that closer. So you'll notice that there's this bolt here, which is the bolt attaching the brake to the fork. But then there's this screw right here, okay? And that's a spring tension screw. Essentially what that screw does is it pulls on the spring that's in the brake. And what do the springs do? The springs pull the brake away from the rim. So if you're braking and you let go, there's no use if the brakes are still engaged. That spring pushes the brake pads away from the rim. Okay, so the more you tighten that little screw over there, I don't know if you can see it, the tiny little screw over there, the more it pulls on that side. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put this back in here. And you'll notice that so right now you notice only this side is moving, right? as I tighten this side, it's gonna pull that pad more. So here, have a look. Now you see that this side is starting to move a little bit more. Conversely, I can actually loosen the other side as well, and it'll have the same effect. There you go. So both sides are moving almost the same amount. Now you can give it a spin, and now you know that the wheel's not rubbing on the brake pad, and you're good to go. So to answer that question in a very long way, you just have to make sure that the brake pads are actually mostly parallel, or if not towed in. If you want to be super, if you want to err on the safe side, then tow them in, and most likely the squealing will go away. Any more questions?
That's amazing. I think that's the problem with my son's brake right now. So
it's a very common problem, actually, brake squeal. So yeah, and just to add, you can even adjust your gears, and I would say that is more complicated than brake adjustments. Brake adjustments and flat repairs, I think, if you want to learn, it's definitely very accessible. Gear adjustments, you don't need any special tools. Yeah, funny enough, you can also do it just with this tool. The thing is, it's a little bit, requires a little bit more finesse, and like a little bit of an adjustment here or there, it can really throw off the gears. Whereas with brake adjustments, you know, if it's a little tighter or a little looser, it's not a big deal. You're having to pull your brake a little less or a bit more, as long as it's not rubbing, right? And you're aware how it functions. But gear adjustments are more finicky. So, you know, you'd be playing with the derailleur in the back over there to do that. And this is why a lot of people, especially in downtown where it's flat, ride single speed bikes, because you don't have to worry about 2 extra derailleurs, extra chain, extra gears, 2 extra shifters, more cables. You just have 2 wheels, 2 brakes, and a frame, right? It's not bad. I rode single speed long distance for the first few years when I got into cycling, but then definitely, like I said, because, you know, it was cheaper and I was poor at the time as a university student. But if you want, you can. It is really good training though for your legs, because you don't have an option of gearing down when you go up a hill. It's also low maintenance. So if you don't have to go very far, or if you live, if your commute is mostly flat, it's an option, or not, or you can use it to go long distance. But yeah, I'm hoping one day in the near future, we can have you guys in and do some clinics on gear adjustments and brake adjustments more thoroughly, like how do you replace the cables as well. You know, and that can be a bit more complicated, but not too complicated. I pulled aside some brake cables just to show you guys, but I think just doing it online is a little difficult because you have to really feel it to kind of get it. But you know, you have to buy the brake cables. And there's only 2 types, so you can't really go wrong with brake adjustment as a DIY, essentially. And then I'll show you guys here. What you do is, if you can get the brake cable out of this here, there's a slot cut into the brakes, and you can remove it. And I can release it here. And if I do that, you'll see that the brake tip just comes out usually quite easily. There you go. There you go. So now you have the cable. Sometimes if you have left your bike in the balcony of your building, water will get in there and it will get rusty and then will get shut. We see so many bikes like that because folks don't have access to bike racks, right, in this building. And so they'll leave it in the balcony, which is I totally get it. And so the moisture gets in though, that's the problem, and then just rusts it from the inside. So you can replace this cable super easily. You saw how easy it was to just take it off. So you just pull that one out and you put a new one in. And you can attach it to this bolt here, which is on the brake arm, brake caliper arm, and then you're good to go. But, I think I'm ranting a little bit. Any more questions?
Dave, you're never ranting. Thank you so much for sharing. I just wanted to chime in to say thank you. It was a pleasure to see how you covered these topics. And I wanted to ask, as your sister site here, do you have plans to continue doing any kind of online resources, or do you have recommendations for people who want to continue their learning while they can't come into our hubs and learn hands-on?
Yeah, there are some great online resources. pinkbike.com has some instructional videos. One of the biggest manufacturer of tools is this company here, Park Tools, and on their website they have a lot of videos on how to do it, repairs as well. Because they sell tools, it's in their interest to have as many people doing it themselves, right? So they have great videos. They have instructions as well if you want to follow by reading rather than watching. So it's great, and you don't need a whole lot of tools to do most of the things in your bike. Like I said, flat repair, brake adjustment, gear adjustments, which make up like 90% of the work most bikes will get throughout their lifetime. Really, you can do with very, very few tools. And just to give you a comparison, like the bike shop I worked at, they would charge you $90 for a basic tune-up, right? Which actually is kind of like the going rate. So I'm not, criticizing them. Like I said, bike shops have a really hard time managing overhead and then costs. But if you can do it yourself, and if you want to do it yourself, it's definitely doable, right? In terms of us doing the clinics, thanks for asking, Danielle. We would love to do more. We got interned at the hub just yesterday. So now we can do more clinics. I want to ramp it up to the point where maybe we do like 2 every week,
Yeah, we can check in together on that, because some of the other DIY spaces are also providing clinics. So yeah, maybe as a group we can give some resources so people can continue the learning at home.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. If I can plug Bike Sauce here, they're doing some online repair clinics. If you guys haven't been to Bike Sauce, they're on the East End. Southeast downtown, east of downtown. And they are a DIY hub as well. I don't think they build bikes to give away for free. Danielle, maybe you can address this. Do they still, can you still pick up like parts and frames from their pile and build your own bike?
In normal times, yeah. So they're a completely volunteer-run place. So they do have rebuilt bikes for sale often. I'll post a link in the chat there to the upcoming workshops that they're doing, because yeah, that's definitely part of this group of collectives, and they'll for sure be full of knowledge too. Yeah,
I can recommend Bike Sauce in the East End, but in the West End there is Bike Pirates on near Bloor and between Kiel and Lansdowne. There is also apparently York University has one. Not apparently, they definitely do Regenesis, but I'm not sure if they're open to any large capacity. Ursan over there is pretty great, so check them out at York University. U of T has Bike Chain. Not Bike Chain, right, Danielle?
Yeah, Bike Chain at U of T is great for folks who are very central. And yeah, most or all of these places, so based on your neighborhood, you might have one close by, and we're in Flemington. So yeah, if you have a bike and you need it repaired and Shuaib is too far away for you, you can contact any of those collectives, drop them off, and we'll do our best to do the repair for you.
Absolutely, and don't forget where Danielle is, Gateway. Danielle, do you want to say a little bit about the Gateway Hub?
Yeah, so it's a pleasure to be part of the Community Reduce and Reuse program family. So the Gateway Hub was started shortly after the Tobermory Hub was launched. We have many of the same kind of facilities. The setup might be a little bit different, but yeah, you can come in and do minor repairs, or we have learn to ride sessions and group rides during normal times. Probably the best place to go for the updates is on the City of Toronto website, the Community Reduce and Reuse program site that Jed and Mildred, I'm sure, already linked everyone to. And that has a full summary of all of the programs, whether it's Bicycle Hub, composting, sewing programs in the various areas of the city. So yeah, you can go there and see all the info in one place.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one, well, Vijaya will know this. We're trying to set up one in the Rexdale Women's Center. And we did run into a little bit of trouble about being inside the hub to do the work. Part of the reason why that list is getting longer. But we're trying to set up one in the Rexdale Women's Center as well. And I'm there on Wednesdays. Yeah, so let's hope that that one flourishes and we can have like a thriving bike shop in northwest corner of the city as well. Any other questions? Oh, Danielle, thank you for the links. Really appreciate it.
I just realized Mildred already posted it as well. You're fast, Mildred. Good job.
Thanks,
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah.
Wow, that it was a lot of information, and I never knew that a tire could have so many information on it. It's like all the arrows and all the numbers and what have you. So, wow, thank you. And we're surely more armed right now, and I'm sure our participants are more, I guess, armed with more information on how to fix their bikes. And they, in case like it's two-way advance for their skills, like they know where to go now that they met you. And yeah, so you can type in actually your email, Shuaib, in here.
Yeah, I put it here. I don't know if you guys saw it. Did that go through? I'll put it up again. It's S, my first initial, and my last name, Alam.
Oh, here you go.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
So
here
it is. That's right. So thank you, Dania, as well for like joining this session. I met Daniel when she was still working at Tobermory Bike Hub, and she's such a skillful mechanic in terms of like repairing bikes. And it's so rare to see a woman doing this kind of job. So hats off to her actually, and she's such an encouraging like colleague in the CRRP family. So thank you, Daniel, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mildred. It's a pleasure to be among you all.
Yeah. So is there any last questions before we wrap up? I know I have my son here and he's a little shy, and we have our neighbor, he's into BMX, and my son is into mountain biking. And I know a lot of boys and girls are into mountain biking. So yeah, so thank you for all for coming here today and learning about bike repair, and hope that you can like stay in touch with the Bike Repair Hub, because they're just in our community. So if there's no more questions, thank you all for joining. Thank you, Shuaib, for such a very informative workshop, and hope to see you in our next event and in our watch out for our farm events and all the other hubs events throughout the year. So
thank you, Mildred. We all have to thank Mildred a lot. She's been sitting in front of her computer for the last like 50 hours or something. So it's my hats off to you. Thank you so much for doing that. It's thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you also to Fatin. He's been working in the back end as well.
Thanks, Fatin.
He makes us all look good, and it makes it all run so smoothly, everything on social media and Zoom and Facebook. So thank you so much, Fatin. He says hello.
Hi. Thanks, Fatin.
All right, everyone. So happy Earth Day and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Happy Earth Day, everyone.
And
happy
take care.
Earth Day. Thank you. Take care.
And stay safe.
Yes, you as well.